Hello, all. We're back again to give you the opportunity to meet a particular wonderful man. This man has spent his whole life in astrology. He has so much to teach us, so much. He's written a fabulous book that all of us need to read. And I'm going to have the pleasure now of introducing you to this fellow. His name is Chandrasekhar Sharma, and please welcome him. It is such an
I,
honor to have you here. Such an honor.
thank you. Thank you very much, Phileas. It is years since we met at a conference. If I remember right at my age, it was in Jagannath Puri, isn't it?
It was in Puri, and we walked on the shores of the Bay of Bengal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. Pleasure seeing you. So, how are things, dear?
Everything is just fine here. I am looking
Wonderful.
forward to having you share your wonderful history with all of our viewers. And
Okay.
I'm hoping that you would share how you came into astrology. I know it
Uh-huh.
has been involved in your life,
All right.
and how you live in this wonderful practical world of being a mechanical engineer and a Jyotishi.
Oh, yeah.
Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Though it's a long story, see, my father was a doctor by profession and he knew astrology. His mother knew astrology, and the forefathers also knew astrology. We actually come from southern part of India, and my grandfather migrated to Indore in central part of India, and so the family was there. And what used to happen is my father came to Nagpur as a doctor, and astrologers from here would come to him when their predictions failed to ask him Dr. Sharma, why did this fail? I mean,
Mhm.
theoretically, this should have happened. And then he used to talk to them. And I was, I think, 6 or 8, I don't remember, maybe 6. And my father would tell me to bring his books from the Almera, saying, like, okay, bring out Jatak Parijata, part 2, Shloka 16 on, say, chapter 7. And then while coming to him, I would read through it just like a small boy. I always liked reading much. I was a voracious reader, still am. And so I could understand what is happening. And this went on for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years, perhaps. And once a very learned astrologer from Nagpur, I mean, you may not know, Nagpur has had great astrologers. H.N. Katwe was in Nagpur for many years. P.S. Shastri, who has written a commentary on Jaimini Sutram, is also from
Mhm.
Nagpur. He was professor of physics here.
Mhm.
And so that was a time when pretty knowledgeable astrologers were in Nagpur. So Dani Shastri was one of the astrologers who came here, and he asked my father something. And after that, he asked my father whether I will be studying astrology. He said, whether your son will study astrology. So my father said, why don't you look at his chart and tell me? You know, I don't look at family's chart, my own family's chart, because it is difficult to be unbiased.
No.
Yeah. So what happened? See, you sometimes are you want to play smart and you are caught. That is what happened with me. So Dani Shastri said he looked at my chart. You know, in my chart, Rahu, Mars, and Saturn are in the seventh house. And so he said, "Oh, perhaps he will have 3 marriages." And like a fool who should not have talked, I intervened and I said, "Why?" Jupiter aspects Saturn, Rahu, Mangal, and then there is a shloka called Rahu Dosha Buddha Hanyat Ubhayastu Shaneshchara, and all that, like a fool, I blurted out. And then said there is exchange between Saturn and Mercury. both are Gautam, and blah, 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 blah. And being the learned person that he was, with the great humility, he said, "Oh, I just missed it, my dear boy. You are right. You will only marry once." So, and then I realized that I have blurted out. And in my time, young boys were tolerated and talked to, not the other way around. So
Yes.
I immediately slipped inside. My father talked to him. He went away. And then my father called me. He said, "Shekhar, come here." So I knew something is coming. Of course, my father never hit me or anything. He was very silent type of person,
Mhm.
very mature, peaceful. So he said, "Don't you know how to talk to elders and knowledgeable people?" And now I knew that the only defense is offense. So I said, "So where was I wrong? What I said was correct." He said, "You were correct, but you should have asked him whether due to aspect of Jupiter anything is going to change. And since all these three are together, will Rahu not take over functions of both of Mars and Saturn?" And he would have got it in a snap of finger, what you are getting at, and he would not have been insulted. You insulted him. This is bad. And then he told me one shloka which is given in my book. He said, "Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat." Talk the truth, but the truth which is palatable to hear. Satyam apriyam na bruyat. If something hurts somebody, even if it is true, don't say that. And then he went on to say, "Nanrutam cha priyam bruyat." Just because something people like to hear, don't tell lies. And Esha Dharma Sanatana. He said, "This is our ancient tradition and you should follow that." I have not forgotten it. I am now about approaching 72nd year of my life, soon on 26th January. And that's why I always tell my students this thing, that don't be harsh. And people anyway come to us because they are stressed out. And you tell them that you are going to lose X and lose Y. Exactly that is the reason he has come. And as an astrologer, I think our philosophy is to help people out of their difficulty and show them the way
Mhm.
rather than scaring them off. So that is how my father came to know. And then he said, "Okay, uh, we don't earn from this. This is our family tradition.
Mhm.
And if you are okay with that, then you can learn. I'll give you book to read on a Sunday. So that because for your you see, earning, you must study hard, get into some profession." And
Mhm.
see, since then I have been studying and reading, and over time I have understood that I understood the least amongst the astrologers, the galaxy of astrologers, because so many systems of astrology are there, and there are so many interpretation of the same thing. And so that is how I came. And being an engineer, of course, later on I realized that finite things which we think are scientific and must occur in X manner do not always happen in that fashion. So, like an engineer, when designing, generally, at least in our age, used to keep a factor of 4 or 5 as a safety factor. So, suppose you need a 1 inch thick beam, we would go for a 5 inch thick beam so it doesn't fail. And still, 20 times it would not fail, and 21st time it would fail. And then
Mhm.
that also, so you will find so many engineers or so many doctors, they know I have operated upon like this 20 times, but 21st time something goes wrong for no reason, I don't understand it. And you will find in the modern times most doctors and engineers are attracted towards astrology, perhaps because that is a science of probability.
Well, it's been described that way many times. Now, today I understand you are going to talk to us about one particular topic, and that particular topic is the Characaricus.
Right. See,
And
Charak Karak, yeah, you're right.
when you want the slides up, we will put them up.
Why not? Start even now, because let us, yeah, start the first slide and then we will talk the next one naturally and go to the next one. Yeah. See, Charakaraka is one concept which is in astrology, and there is so much misunderstanding about it. And the reason is people think that it is a Jaimini specialty. Then those who go by Parashara think that it is Parashara specialty. It is neither. It is given in books, many standard texts. The problem is the what is happening is as we were talking, it is more of a statistical science or a science of probability. So we have got sthira karakas, the karakas which are fixed, like sun is karaka for father. Then we have got bhava karakas, like for lagna, sun is the karaka for the first bhava. This is fixed. So sages went perhaps one stage ahead and thought, okay, for everybody, sun would be Karaka is fine, but there would be some other planet who would perhaps be more connected with his sense of self-confidence, or because sun generally represents self-confidence, and if it goes, or of course, ego. So what they did was, Chara means that which is movable, which is changeable, isn't it? So Chara plus Karaka. Karaka means Karotiti Karaka, a planet which causes something to be done, or some action to be executed. And that is where from the word Chara Karaka came. So the next concept was, uh, it has more to do with tenancy of a planet in a particular Rasi. The concept here, because that has never been explained, and perhaps uh, I don't know why it should have been explained, but it's easier to understand. As a planet travels for more time in a particular Rashi, he leaves more impression or more influence on that Rashi or that Bhava is the basic principle. Like if I come to your place for 2 days, you will be a bit disturbed, but there would not be big disturbance in your house. Nothing will happen. I can't leave a lasting impression on you. But if I come and stay with you for say 3 years, you would have changed much, and I would be influencing you in a much more, what we call, intense way than somebody just passing through me. So what they did was, the higher the degrees, the higher the significance of the karaka. So Atma Karaka is always the planet which is highest in degree, which has traveled the highest number of degrees in a sign. That is called the Atma Karaka, the first Karaka, which has the greatest influence in that person's life. My interpretation is it will have greatest influence in area which represents his body itself, because Tanu Bhava is the Bhava for Atma Karaka, isn't it? So, I mean, this is my logic. I may be wrong, and astrologers should correct me. Okay,
No.
then
Sure.
next is in case of Rahu. That is exactly why in case of Rahu, they say you deduct 30, I mean, whatever the degrees are of Rahu are there, should be deducted from 30 degrees, because Rahu travels in the reverse direction. So when he is in 2 degrees, so he is coming out of the sign. He has transferred already 28 degrees. He enters from the 30th degree onward. So that concept should be pretty clear. Then naturally, in order of lesser and lesser tenancy in a Rashi, the importance of those other karakas gets reduced. Now this is the basic idea behind the Chara karakas. Okay.
Thank you.
And then you can see there are, now the next thing is, both Jaimini and Parashara have commented about Chara karakas in their treatises. People may know or may not know, but yeah, Chara karakas are also at some places mentioned in Chandrakala Nadi. So it is not as if it is a Jaimini specialty, and that is very clear when Jaimini says Upadesha Vyakhyasam. He says, I am defining something more elaborately. So what Jaimini is doing is he is focusing only on this part of it. That is why somewhere else he says Siddhadaya, Horadaya Siddhaha. You can understand about Hora and other divisional charts from what has already been stated by the learned. Again, he goes on. I mean, the another problem is people think Jaimini means Rashi Dasha. That is again a fallacy. Because if you go ahead and read Jaimini himself, he says, Udu Daya Siddhaha. Udu means nakshatra. So nakshatra dashas are already been told, have already been told and commented upon at length by the great learned people, the Pravartakas. So I don't need to talk about that. I am telling you about the Rashi Dasha. So while I think studying Jaimini, people should first understand that these are not mutually exclusive systems. Parashari and Jaimini can be used in combination. Uh, I mean, I know many people will not like it, but yeah, that is it. And then the confusion begins because some sages say that there are 8 karakas, some say there are 7 karakas, even within Parashara. Uh, the reason is there are different manuscripts available. In Sanskrit in ancient time, people used to memorize everything. And so brevity was one of the specialty of the language. And then it later on, after thousands of years, it got written down. While writing, see, sometimes memory plays tricks with people. And so some you will see certain stanzas will be different in one edition of BPHS and different in another edition. Same happens with Jaimini. So now, as we say that though in the Santanam edition there are 8 Charakarakas given, as you can see, there are 3 opinions. Okay, one is that there are only 7 Karakas, which begins from Atma Karaka, Amatya Karaka, Bhratru Karaka, Matru Karaka, Putra Karaka, Gnati Karaka, and Dara Karaka. Dara is wife. Gnati means the relatives or the family as such. Putra Matru, I think people understand. If not, then I can of course tell. Now these correspond to, I mean, then there is another part which says that Matru Karaka and Putra Karaka merged, which is accepted by everybody. I mean, even the 8 Karaka proponents accept that Matru and Pitru merge into one. Okay. So then, though they take 8 Karaka, it is always reduced to 7. So this is another way of looking at it. The third way is, they say no merging, no nothing. It starts from Atma Karaka, Amatya Karaka, Bhratru Karaka, Matru Karaka. Till that time, everybody is in synchronicity. Then instead of Putra, they bring in the Pitru Karaka, followed by Putra Karaka, then Nati Karaka, and then Dara Karaka. So these are 3 different opinions which exist. Okay. Now, if we look at what the sage has originally said, if we can go back to the original one, so he talks about the 7 grahas. He says, Ravyadi Pangu Parayanta Anshadika Grahodvija. He is talking about 7 grahas as Karaka, acting as Karaka. So the whether 8 grahas are to be considered or 7 grahas are to be considered is one part of it. And the next part is whether the Karakas themselves, I mean the indicators that these planets are for, are 8 or 7. So now you get into the confused part of the astrology. Okay, so we go next. Maybe the 5th one, if we can look at the 5th planet. So we can see the next stage comes is what happens to Rahu. Because sometimes it is natural that 2 planets might have identical degrees. We have said that, okay, because of number of degrees, the influence is more. So their position in that hierarchy of 7 is X or Y or Z. What happens there? So the sages say Rahu takes the place of the next Karaka, which is left. Like suppose at 4th level, Guru has X number of degrees. Mars also has the same number of degrees. So they say that both of them become the Matru Karakas. Naturally, for Putra Karaka, there is nobody. That is where Rahu enters. This is what has been said by sages. Not only that, they go one step ahead. What they say, in case another 2 planets again have identical degrees, then what happens? So they say that the next Karaka, because one the two planets merging into one Karaka will have nobody to be considered. So that is where the Sthira Karaka comes up. Now, Sthira Karaka, as we know and as are told by Jaimini and Parashara, are a bit different. So I would urge people to study them. They even call Shani as the Putra Karaka if people read. I mean, everybody swears by Parashara, but they rarely read it, is my charge. And people think that I am a bit rude, but maybe at 72 years you can afford to be rude, isn't it? Phileas? So,
There's advantages to it.
so, so this is how it goes on. Now, why am I saying that it cannot be Atma Karaka? Is in my opinion, of course, which I will give at the end of the presentation. Rahu cannot become Atma Karaka, and it is not something that has come out of my brains or whatever. At one place, the sage does say that he cannot become Atma Karaka. If if you give me time, I'll just find out, because at my age, forgetting is a normal thing, and so Atma Karaka naiva. He said ki Rahu cannot become the Atma Karaka. Budhav Rashi Kala Dikyat Grahya naiva Karakaha. Isn't it? So Budhav Rashi Kala Dikyat. The intelligent people understand that only because the anshas are identical, that does not make anybody Atma Karaka. So no two planets merge into Atma Karaka, is what is being said by the sage. And the reason is pretty clear, that Rahu, being a Chaya Graha, perhaps has indirect influence on life of a person. He needs somebody to express himself through. So these are what is going on about Atma Karaka. So next, if you can pull up the next slide, maybe, yeah. So we can say where he can enter. Two planets merge into one Karaka having identical degree. And as we can see, he has ability to replace planets, because the illusion is created. There is something blank here. One planet has merged into another planet in one Karaka. So blank, that is his area. We even know that the Gulika, one of the complex matter, is always at the end of Shani's Amsha. So when all these planets are over, then these Chaya Grahas come in. And that is perhaps the logic behind it. And I think much needs to be done in this direction by astrologers. They should go more into research part of this. So now we'll go to the next slide, and as I said, the why this, now any young astrologer might think, okay, why so much confusion is there in this science of astrology? I mean, we are only talking about Charakaraka, and I am going to only talk about Atmakaraka. And if in such a single parameter there is so much confusion, I mean, what sort of science this is? These people say this is scientific. So one has to always remember the reason. First of the reason is, initially this science was always uh, taught in by verbal transmission of knowledge. There was no system of writing down the divine sciences. The idea, it is not that the ancestor did not know how to write, because matra is matruka, and matruka, from matruka comes the mantra. So from Vedic times, letters were known. The idea was, these are sciences which, if used with bad intentions, can harm people, and they should not fall into hands of somebody who might sometime or other misuse them. That is why this is called Vedanga, part of Vedas. Now, you had to memorize about 100 subjects in ancient Hindu tradition. Jyotisha was the last one taught. And as time went on and people's memory perhaps went down, the practice of writing reducing them down to writing started. So they got reduced into manuscript form. There are sometimes some shlokas are different in manuscript. Then the next part is Sanskrit itself is a language of extreme brevity. And it uses similes and allegories in a very liberal fashion. That is why interpretation of shlokas becomes more and more difficult. Depends on the person who is interpreting it and his own viewpoint. And it will be interesting for you to know that a single word water has about 100 synonyms in Sanskrit.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so starting from Paya to Udaka to there are so many. You just can't, and this happens with everything. So I can interpret a shloka in a particular fashion. You can interpret in a different fashion because it is your perspective how you look at it. The idea again was perhaps that the Guru used to provide the final key. So we have something in our local language, we call it Guru Killi, the key provided by the Guru. So perhaps he used to select the student that he thought would not misuse this science for harassing others or blackmailing others. And so that sort of ambiguity is always left in those sciences. Then within different editions, there are again different shlokas. You go further, then you come to sutras. This is I was talking more specifically about Charakarkas because at least in other part of astrology and astronomy, you have got shlokas which are pretty descriptive. Jaimini wrote in sutra forms. Sutras are the briefest form of expression. Like you have got one sutra called Na Kvachita, not sometimes. What does it mean? Because it appears, it appears in the first chapter itself, where it says, Prachir Vrutti Vishamesu, Parovrutter Parishu. So he says, ki, if it is an odd sign, you count in regular direction. If it is even side, you count in reverse direction. And then he says, sometimes it is not so. So now when it is not so, nothing about it. So you interpret what it is. Fortunately, the great Nilakantha did interpret it, so we can at least say with some confidence. And there were Buddhakarikas, there were some aphorisms. Certain things were given in Parashari also. And that is why we are able to interpret it. I mean, however, we might think that we would be able to interpret it right. There is always an element of, confusion there. Now, how to interpret would be decided by the person who interprets, and sometimes we can make mistakes. We are all humans. If we see our sages, even the great Parashara says, "Ki Garda Dina Mataha." He says, "This is my opinion. This is what Garga used to think," and he leaves it for the posterity to decide what is correct. Those sages never said that I am the only one who is right. He said, this is my opinion, this is others' opinion, which is contrary to it. That is why in even the Charakarka says, Saptanam Ashtanam Va. He says, in my opinion, it is 7, but some also say it can be 8. And so the confusion starts, as you can say. So we will give, the sages had that grace of, giving importance to others' opinion. And as I said, that is when I started realizing what my father was telling me. You be gracious to accept others' opinion also. You may not like it, but it is your duty to tell your opinion and then give the others' opinion so that there is no confusion. And let the wise people decide what is right. And so this is what is the reason of difference of opinion between different interpreters of Jaimini. So you have got K.N. Rao interpreting in one way, Irangati Rangachari interprets in another way. Madhura Krishnamurti, who recently expired, doyen of Jaimini astrology, he had a different view on it. And then the great Krishna Mishra, who was contemporary of Varahamihira, has absolutely different opinion about how to interpret Jaimini. And what I would think is the young generation should not get confused because of this. As I was trying to explain, they should understand what is the principle behind it. Okay, why Charakaraka? What is the important? Because he stays for a longer period in the Rashi, so he has some influence on that Rashi. Maybe much greater than for a planet which has just entered. Now, there is a parallel to this in astrology which we generally overlook. What we call as the Balya Avastha or the Mruta Avastha. See, this is a parallel. You know, when a planet is in the first degree, you say its influence is least. Or if it is in the last degrees, we still say the influence is least. Isn't it? So that degrees spent by a planet in a Rashi does have some level of influence on the way we think. And so if we go to the next slide, maybe we would be, as I said, they have said Atma Karaka are 7 in numbers from Sun to Saturn. That is very specific. Even Sitaram edition says the same thing. But they say, some say Rahu is also there, and therefore there are 8. So even the sage Parashara is telling about the other opinion. His opinion is absolutely clear. He says, Athaham. Now I am Sampravakshami telling you about the grahas like Atmakaraka and others, which are 7 in numbers. Beginning from Ravi, Ravyadi, Shanyanta, Shani, end of Shani. That is all. And then he says, Rava Antana Va Ashta Sankhyakan. So, but some say that Rahu also is added, and so they make 8. Okay, so that there is no confusion about whether I am trying to push one or other. I wish that people, young people themselves, try to understand this and gain more knowledge than what we have. And so we will go to the next slide, which would be telling us about Ganesh Datta Pathak edition of same BPHS. Doesn't talk about 10th, 8th Karaka at all. It says there are 7, and I am telling you, only when 2 planets have similar anshas, degrees, then Rahu will also be taken into account to make those 7 Karakas have somebody representing them. Okay, so now we go to the next one. And as I already told you, the manuscript used by P.S. Shastri, Sanjay Rath, K.A. Bankar, with Jaimini Sutra said 8 Karakas, whereas those used by Nilakantha, K.N. Rao, Irangati Rangachari, one of the manuscripts used by Sitaram Jha, though another manuscript of Sitaram Jha does mention 8 Charakarakas. So this is the difference in opinion. Still, all those who are talking about 8 also say that sometimes Matrukaraka and Putrakaraka merge. So my interpretation will be, rather than there being different 8 Karakas, in case of 8 Karakas, again Matru and Pitru come together and Putra come together. So Putra's place is taken by the Pitru Karaka, and it goes to the 7th Bhava where Dara Karaka is located. Okay. So we go to the next, shall we go to the next slide? So that, I mean, because that will make people understand also. Then what has happened is, another reason for Gemini not to grow is there are too many parameters given. Like in the aphorism you are seeing, Eva Manshato Durganastasya. What they are telling is, in the same manner that you are looking from Karakausha, when they give the parameters of how to interpret. Like from Karakausha, say XYZ is there, then that person will do XYZ business. And then they go on and say, see the same thing from Karakausha, same from Navamsha, same from Drishtana. Okay. So you take the next one and then I'll tell. Now the problem is, even Brihat Parashara Horashastra says the same thing. He says, if identical number of malefics occupy 2nd and 8th bhava, from Navamsha occupied by Atmakaraka. But also, it could either also be from Lagna, it could also be from Rashi occupied by Atmakaraka, or from the Arudha Lagna. If both are there, then that is called a yoga for penury. And this is more so if moon aspects it. So now you have got so many permutation combinations available to you to work upon. and a new student can get a bit confused about it. And I would not be surprised if that happens. It happens to me even at my age. So mm, uh, rather, I would say if he gets confused, that is a good sign. That means he is thinking properly. Because astrology is one subject where Gunakara, one of the learned acharyas, says you can even question the rishis, the munis. This is a science, and this has there can be mistakes. Other parts of Vedas you don't question because it is grammar. The grammar is in a particular way. The singing of Vedas in a particular meter, you can't change it. In Mantra Shastra, you can't change the words. But in Jyotish, if what is given when applied to chart is not happening in real life, you can always question it. This is one part that astrologers of my age tend to forget. And we tend to say that sages have said that, forgetting that there were 18 basic pravartakas, the greats who gave this science to us after it got filtered from Lord Shiva to Parvati to Narada and on to others. And that we forget. And so what I think is that habit of inquisitiveness, the courage to question people should be there in young astrologers. Now, at my that is what would be my advice. I hope they listen to it, and yeah. And so we will go to the next. So you can see that same thing. Everybody is saying look at it from 3 places or 4 places. Now, my question is where from am I going to look at it? So we will go to the next slide. Another problem comes is what is Swangsha and what is Karakangsha. Now, at least Jaimini has been consistent in talking only about Swangsha. If you see the sutras, he will always say Swangsha's XYZ from Swangsha. But you read Parashari, sometimes he uses the word Swangsha, sometimes he uses the word Karakangsha. Now, there is again a difference of opinion about Yogadhar to be seen from which, whether from Atmakaraka planet in natal chart or Atmakaraka planet in Navamsha chart. So I am going on giving the reasons of difference of opinion so that by the time we come to the end of the my small homilia about Charakaraka, uh, people at least understand why there is confusion, or sometimes why two great astrologers do not think on the same lines, and they have difference of opinion. It is not because they are not knowledgeable, it is because it is interpretation of a science. Okay, now when they say, like we saw that Eva Manshata Durganashta also can be seen from Drishkana. Now there are umpteen numbers of Drishkana, isn't it? There is Somnath Drishkana, there is Parashari Drishkana, there is Parivruttitra Drishkana. So there are so many types of Drishkana. Which one are you going to take? There are 10 types of Navamashas also, though people do not understand that there are. And so this all, adds to the confusion. Then Somnath, son of Krishna Mishra, in Kalpalata gives a very different way of looking at Navamsha. So this is the reason for confusion. Now what we should do is we should try to remove those cobwebs to the best of our own abilities. And then see that on some chart of some well-known person whose life is known to everybody. Otherwise, I think, as you know very well, of course, you know me long. I am reluctant about the, what do we call, the example charts, because I can always give some chart about whom you don't know anything, and I can tell you anything about it and justify what I'm saying. So my way is to go for some chart which is available on the net, whose life is also available on the net, and I can't lie about it. And I think that is the best. But my advice to astrological students would be to understand the principles. No two charts are going to be the same. So I may give thousands of charts and still he will not be able to learn from it, because the next chart that he gets will have different combination. I think there are about 1 billion different combinations possible with 9 grahas, 12 houses, and Navamashas. If somebody calculates it, he will understand what is the probability. Isn't it? Had that not been the case, the science itself would be a failure. And then comes the dasha, and then comes the transit. So we have got a huge lot of things going on. And human brain also has ability to process X number of things, isn't it? So understand the principles. Once you understand the principles, apply it in your own fashion, in light of your own wisdom, rather than accepting because I am saying so. Chandrasekhar ji has said that is the final. No, no. In astrology, there is no final word. If what you say is what is happening with the Jataka when he comes to you, you are on the right track. Then comes the predictive part of it, isn't it? You should at least suppose somebody comes to me. I should know at least what is on a very broad level happening in his life. If I can tell that, then the question of my prediction comes in. Or somebody is sitting in front of me. If I don't know whether his lagna is right or wrong, at a later stage by saying that the time was not exact and that is why my predictions failed, uh, I'm sure my father would never have liked it. He would have laughed at it. He would say that person is in front of you. Don't you know what is his lagna and what must be the charge? Where is the question? Why are you? He was a doctor. He used to say, I look at the patient first. I decide what is the diagnosis. Then only I would refer it to pathologist if I just want to confirm my diagnosis. I would not send him to pathologist because I don't know what is happening with him. So fortunately, he is no more. Otherwise, in today's world and medical practices, he would have been very unhappy. Where when you go to a doctor, he gives you a list of investigations to be done and then tells you the diagnosis. So by the way, of course, this is going away from the focus of the things, but I think I would like people to understand this. This
Mhm.
is most important if we really want to take astrology to a level where it does help people. So if we go to the next slide. See, at my age, old people talk much, so you have to bear with it.
No, 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 no.
And
You are speaking wonderful things.
so now this let us summarize the differences of opinion. One is how many charakas must be considered, 7 or 8. This is first thing. Then can Rahu be a charakaraka and can Rahu be an atmakaraka? These are two different things. He can be a charakaraka, but can he also be atmakaraka? Something that he can become atmakaraka. Third point is what could be karakas for other bhavas? Because nobody has thought. I mean, I was surprised, and maybe I'm also wrong. But I used to say ki when 7 karakas are given, what happens to the other 7 bhavas, other 5 bhavas? Extremely sorry, isn't it? I mean, because in the Karakadhyaya, where Parashara tells that, he gives Thira Karaka for all the 12 things. He gives Bhava Karaka for all the 12 bhavas. Then why in case of Charakaraka, he stops only at 7? Is there a reason or is there not a reason? Is something we must always think about. Then, is there a difference between Swamsha and Karakamsha? Yes or no? And then, is there any significance of Rashi occupied by Atma Karaka in natal chart? So these are the 4 things on which people differ, or rather 5 things. We are confusion. So we will go to the next stage, where, as my father used to say, giving everybody else's opinion, then give your opinion, because you may be the most wrong person in the world. So I have explained what others think and what is the confusion. And my opinion is use 7 karakas because they correspond to 7 bhavas. From the first bhava, the Tanu bhava, and end up at the Dara bhava. The connection is very easy. Amatya has the treasury. King is the body himself and the Atma and the soul, which actually means Atma, the self, which is the Tanu bhava. Bhratru means brother. Third bhava is bhava for brother, which is known as Bhratru bhava. Fourth is the Matru bhava, bhava for Matru, so it has to have a karaka. Fifth is the Putra bhava. Sixth is the Nati, the Putra bhava is house of progeny. Fifth house is house of progeny. Nati, relatives. Sixth house is house of relatives, especially the maternal relatives and relatives as such. And Dara is a spouse. Seventh bhav is Dara. So these karaka obviously refer to these 8 areas. Now, in my opinion, Rahu can be Charakaraka only when 2 planets are identical in identical degrees and therefore they merge. Rahu then becomes Karaka for the next position. However, he cannot become Atma Karaka as there is no merger of planets with identical degrees for Atma Karaka. Because if you read properly, and of course most of the astrologers read properly, what he says is this is only in case of Atma Karaka. He is saying if two planets are having passed maximum degrees, then look at the one who has passed more minutes. If both have identical minutes, they'll go on to the seconds. One who is more in seconds is the Atma Karaka. So he is pretty clear that this degrees equivalence is not related to, and then he says ki the wise understand that in Atma Karaka, just degrees being same doesn't make any planet an Atma Karaka, isn't it? So even the slightest difference by which that planet has gone ahead of the other planet makes him Atma Karaka. So Rahu's merger has nothing to do with Atma Karaka position itself or getting the highest degree. Okay. So I hope this is what I think, and I hope the astrologers will think upon it when they read both Parashara, maybe 3 or 4 editions, and 4 or 5 editions of Gemini also. Then, what about the rest of the Karakas is a question. Now we know our chart is divided into 2 parts, isn't it? One which is risen part and which is yet to rise part, sort of thing. So that division is always from 1 and 7. So in my opinion, they work on pairs. You know, Dhana is wealth, whereas 12th is Vaya. They are opposite to each other, but they complement each other. Unless you have Dhana, you cannot have Vaya. You can't spend unless you have got income. Okay. Then comes Bhratru, the 3rd bhava. Now the 11th bhava is called the elder brother. So you will see always a connection, the counterpart being there. The younger brother is the 3rd bhava, elder brother is the 11th bhava, isn't it? Your parakrama, your valor can earn you money, or if you are earning, you have some valor left. So if we go on distributing it, then the Matru Karaka. Matru Karaka is for 4th house. 4th house is also for your qualifications, which entitle you to get some work or otherwise. Okay. Its counterpart is work on the 10th house. Then we come to the Putra Karaka, the 5th house. Okay. Its counterpart is father, because this Putra is also going to be father of somebody, and this father was also Putra of somebody else. So they have a direct link. Okay. Then comes the Nati Karaka. Now here you have to understand, Nati Karaka he is talking about Karaka for the 6th bhava. What is it? It is Roga. It is diseases. And 8th is death or life. Which, I mean, the way you look at it, I always look at it as life, which when hard leads to death. But so they have got, again, they are only 2 sides of the same story. The 2 sides of a coin. Atma, myself. There is no, what we call, no shadow for it. I am myself, my soul is mine. And my counterpart, my wife, is supposed to be one. At least in ancient time, it was supposed to be one. But then anybody with whom you can gel well and with whom you can merge is the 7th house. If we look at it properly, you will understand that once a person gets married, after over time, he gets some of the habits of the wife, and wife gets some of his habits. And that is when that marriage lasts. So they merge into each other, isn't it? So for in my view of thinking, Atma Karaka would be Karaka for the Lagna and the Atma Karaka. Dara would be Dara. But these I have got the counterpart in other bhavas. So like pairs like 2, 12, 3, 11, 4, 10, 5, 9 and 6, 8. This is my opinion. It is up to the learner to work more upon it and take it to another level. So shall we go to the next slide? That would be ideal, so that we think about what happens. So now, as I said, Gemini only talks about Swangsha, whereas Parashara talks about Swangsha and Karakausha. Sometimes they appear to be synonymous also. Now, Swangsha certainly refers to the Ansha of Swa, the Atmakaraka. So it is perhaps Namansha Rashi occupied by Karakansha, Atmakaraka. This can be used for trying to understand the Ishtadevata by analyzing the 12th from it, as he said. And also, sometimes it is a pointer to the health issues of the Jataka. And this is what I have seen. But ultimately, as I said, nothing in astrology is to be taken at only face value. Everybody should experience it. Karakansha should be actually Rashi, where that Swansha Rashi falls, is my opinion. So, like, if Atma Karaka occupies X Navansha, perhaps that could be taken as the Swansha, the Karakansha. But this is only technically so. Do we use it or not is a different issue. Uh, as far as I am concerned, I would think wherever that Atma Karaka, whichever Rashi that Atma Karaka himself occupies in Navansha natal chart, that has to be the reference point. Whenever we are looking at career and other things of the or the nature of that person, because so though not exactly Karakansha, we can treat it as Karakansha. Technically speaking, Nidhanamsha Yukta they call when we call about the Navamsha Yukta Rashi. So what is technically I have given earlier that technically it should be Rashi where Swansha Rashi falls. So that is beyond question. But since they are being used as synonymously, the third, another reference point that we get is where the Atmakaraka occupies whichever Bhava and Rashi in natal chart itself. This is a very important thing because this Atmakaraka in X Navansha is occupying X Rashi, so he has influence there. As we were saying, some guest coming here with certain baggage coming with him and making more effect. So we can be called as a Karakansha because Rashi occupied by Atma Karaka. And for people to understand, Ansha is a complex thing. As I was saying that in Sanskrit, you can interpret things in very different manner. In astrology, generally, whenever we say only Ansha, it refers to either Navamsha or Dvadashamsha. But Ansha means a part. Now, a Rashi is also part of a zodiac. The entire zodiac of 30 degrees, out of which 1/12th part is a Rashi. So, yeah, in a way, I could also call it as Karakansha. And so I would perhaps like to call that as the Karakansha than anything else. So this is my way of looking at it. Others who are more learned and well versed in Sanskrit may have different views. So we go to the next slide where we are looking at the chart of Lagna chart of the natal chart of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was Prime Minister of India. He was, and he is still well respected all over the world. I think he was the first Prime Minister who was allowed to address the joint session of US Senate and Congress while sitting. Not being necessary for him to stand, he was asked to sit. And that is, for Indians, it becomes a sort of sign of respect for his knowledge and his ethics. Now we can see here that if we apply the 7 Karaka scheme, Mars becomes the Putra Karaka for him, isn't it? Whereas if we apply the 8 Karaka scheme, then we will see down below, Mars becomes the Pitru Karaka. Okay. So now we should see what is happening. What we see is this Mars is in the 6th house of his natal chart. And again, if we pull down the next slide, we will perhaps see the Navansha. Even in Navansha, it occupies the 6th house. Now, each planet or a Karaka which is this weak will most likely cause some harm because he's Karotiti Karaka. He's indicator of something, and that planet in certain position with strength, it can give something more. With weakness, it will take away something. He's also occupying house of his enemy. And as Putra Karaka, yes, he was a bachelor. He had no children. And in India, at least, if you are a bachelor, you don't have children. That may not be universally applicable. And whereas if we take him to be Pitru Karaka, as in the eighth Karaka scheme, no, his father lived long, sent him to school and sent him to colleges, and so even here we see seven Karakas makes more sense uh, than the uh, eighth Karaka scheme. Isn't it? So shall we go ahead and come to the? This is becoming very lengthy. I hope people are not bored.
No, I don't think anyone's bored.
You are so kind.
We have lots of work to do, is what you're telling us. We must do the research.
So now, as we have said that, you go to the next slide, because this is just explaining exactly what we were talking about. So now what happens is, we see that in his case, Atal Bihari Vajpayee's case, we see that moon is occupying Capricorn Navamsha. So that becomes the Svansha. Now what is said about it is, when Atma Karaka occupies Capricorn Navamsha, I have given the sutra there. Jalachara, Khechara. Jalachara means aquatic animals. Khechara means the planets, because sometimes the planetary, some problem with the planet is indicative of something happening to us. Kheta is planet, sorry, Khechara is birds, actually. Those who can fly. That is why sun, symbol of sun is Khe. Khe indicates sun. Sun, if of course you know, is said to be bird. If we look at the qualities of sun, because he is always constantly in motion. And Kandu means itching, any sort of skin disease or say eczema sort of thing. And then Dushta Grantha Yashta Rife. Rife is Katapayadi of the Katapayadi encryption for Capricorn Rashi. So Dushta Granthi. Now Granthi has two meanings. Here comes Sanskrit at its best. Granthi is also joints. Any joint is Granthi. Though generally by Granthi people think a gland or a bunch of nerves. Okay. Now it is very interesting to know that he did suffer from arthritis, severe arthritis. He had a replacement of both knee joints, and at present he is still living. The reason will come later on. And he now has Alzheimer's disease, which is said to be caused by plaques and tangles in the brain, the ganglia of the brain. So this does look like the physical element of that person. That is why I think that Swansha and the Navamsha it occupies can be perhaps looked at it from that fashion. And even here, when we call Jalachara or we call Khechara, they have multiple meanings. So sometimes people will say, what happens is, there is an aphorism which says that if the Atmakaraka, the Chara Atmakaraka falls in Taurus, Navamsha, then one will have harm from four-legged animals. But to my mind, if there is, this is being talked about without any influence on that planet. If I am not wrong, and I think my logic is fairly okay, if there is a good influence, then that person might even benefit from it. So in case of Taurus, if good influence is there, maybe that person will earn from four-legged animals. And that part of my logic is also confirmed by Parashara, where he does say that Shubha Drushte Labha, then he gets income. And this must always be understood. Whenever there is something negative given, there is always, like we were saying about the Karakas, everything has a positive side and a negative side. You have got wealth and you have got expenditure and loans or debts, isn't it? So here also, whatever is said, if there is good influence, then you might actually even benefit from it. So that should never be let go if we really want Jaimini to get some, a sort of recognition and regular use. What is happening is most of the time, like in Mesha, he will be bitten by, mice and a cat. Now, how many people do you find getting bitten like that? And there are only 12 Namanshas, 12 Rashis. And Atmakarka has to be in one of them, isn't it? So what I'm trying to tell, because I have less time left in this world, so I would like to the younger generation to understand this and think about the probabilities and how things should work out. And if something is not mentioned, we should think that what will happen if there is, as I was saying in my case, with all three malefics in the seventh house, isn't it? So, and the seventh lord himself sitting, occupying the earth from the seventh, I should have had three wives. And I even now sometimes pull leg of my wife's leg, saying, "Where are the other two?" I am only left with one. So, you know, like I will. So she enjoys and laughs, and she said, "Go and have two more, if you dare." so, so we should think about it, because when Jupiter aspect, so he changes something there, isn't it? So we have to look at like. So shall we go to the next one? So he did have both the things. Now, Ishta Devata, about how to find out Ishta Devata. This is my take on it. Everybody has his opinion, because even the sages have told different, Ishta Devatas for different planets. So now we find in Atal Bihari's chart that Moon is occupying Capricorn. So 12th from it is Sagittarius. Now that sign doesn't have any planet. So what we do? Of course, it's its Lord Jupiter. Okay. Now that is certain. But does only Jupiter make the difference? Now we see. Now here we are using Rashi Drishtis, because as Parashara has said, if we read properly, he is talking about degrees of Drishtis and their influence. So he is talking about 30 degrees aspects, which are not possible in Namasha at all. So we use Rashi Drishtis, which are part of Jaimini, also mentioned in Parashari, and also in Chandrakalanadi. I urge people to read more so that they don't get into that trap of X only and nothing else. So now there is Rashi aspects both from Jupiter, from Gemini, and Saturn aspects from Virgo, isn't it? Because the dual signs aspect each other, and the planets within them also aspect their sign. Now we see the Adhidevata of Jupiter is Samba Shiva, and Parashara says it is Shiva. In some editions of Gemini it is called as Shiva, whereas some edition of Parashara say that it is Samba Shiva. Samba Shiva is Lord Shiva with Amba. Amba is name for Parvati. So Amba along with Parvati is Samba Shiva, form of the great Lord Shiva. So finally they are ultimately Shiva. Then we see Saturn with Mercury indicates Vishnu. But here Saturn is alone. He is not with Mercury. Many times people make a mistake of saying that Saturn Adhidevata is Vishnu. No, actually Vishnu's is Adhidevata of Mercury, and both being hermaphrodite planets, they influence each other. So Saturn with Mercury indicates Vishnu, but not Saturn alone. Here it is alone. His Adhidevata is Brahma, some say Yama, both of which are not worshipped. And his Pratyadi Devata is Yama, which is equated to Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva's abode is in funeral grounds. So there is a direct connection between them. Yama is also called Dharma, the one who enforces duties absolutely rigorously and without any feeling of attachment, which is a quality of Lord Shiva. And his disciples and other Hindus will know why Yama is directly connected with Lord Shiva. So we can safely say that Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Ishta Devata, is Lord Shiva, and his worship can help Atal Bihari. So of course we are nobody to give him advice. I mean, had that been the case, we are making this clear so that people don't take it only from a planet in the 12th from Sansha. They also look at the influences there. Because as we see, influences change the things. There is a modification happening. And that is why every person's chart has different connotations rather than a standard connotation as given in the chart. Okay, so we go to the next stage.
Before we go, I mean, could you please explain what is the difference between Adi Devata and Pratyadi Devata?
See, what is happening, what happens is, Adi Devata is the direct Devata and Pratyadi Devata is Prati Adi Devata. I mean, a reflection of that Devata. Prati is a reflection. Now, Brahma is never worshipped in Hindu system of, worship of gods. So naturally, you don't worship Brahma. So what you do, you see his Prati Adi Devata, who is it? It is Yama. Now here it is also interesting. As I was saying, everything has two sides, isn't it? Now Brahma is the creator and Yama takes away life.
Yes.
So you can see the Adi Devata and Prati Adi Devata. As we were saying, second house, so 12th house. So this reflects all over the Vedic sciences. Many a times it is not specifically said. And since it is not specifically said, we go on arguing that it is not so. But we think about it very uh, logically and without any bias. And then we will think that like Lord Shiva, his half is Lord Parvati. Now Lord Shiva is black. Okay. He is always in Yoga Nidra. Lady Parvati is white. She protects everybody. Lord Shiva is represented as sun. Sun is rather represented by Lord Shiva. Moon is represented by Parvati. And what is it? See, sun's light is reflected by moon. Sun's light is harsh. Pure knowledge is very difficult to stomach and accept. So it has to be modified and then given to those who are able to absorb it. So even about Jyotish or all other science, all the 100 sciences, it is said that they were revealed by Lord Shiva to Lady Parvati. And that was carried by Narada to earth. Okay, now Narada is again a complex thing. I mean, I hope I am not boring you, but Nar means water. First thing we must understand. Narada means water. Like Dhanada. Dhanada is another name for Jupiter, one who gives Dhana. Narada is one who gives water. That is why he can very easily go in all three lokas. You see what happens. Water goes in a sort of a lake, isn't it? Below the surface of water. It is also brought on below the surface of earth. It is also used on earth to irrigate. Then it gets evaporated, goes to heavens, comes back. And we say Narada used to travel in all three lokas. So are you getting the scientific connection with the word just mere Narad and actually what happens?
Yes, yes. Wonderful.
And what our sages were saying, and we think that it is somebody with a big, sort of shiki, the touch your head and creating problems everywhere. But you see, the damage caused by water can be very heavy.
Yes.
That's
and we say he used to go and create problems between gods. Now, why don't we think about it? Those people who could understand the very extremely complex procedure of creation of universe were they idiots? No, they were not. So everything has a different and exactly opposite way of looking at it. And only then they will gel. That is why when first your opponent also you see from the 7th house, isn't it? So, but when they gel, they become one, and then they become potent to deliver something, isn't it? So, I mean, I am digressing from the subject and from this, but I think if more and more astrologers and especially young boys start understanding the science behind it, they would perhaps understand why we are. See, allegories are used to explain things, isn't it? We say Shani is bad, he is this. No, they are talking about something, because in Linga Puran they say after describing six planets, he says that great planet which is coming very slowly, he is Saturn. He is the ultimate. So, so you have to understand that many a times allegories were used, physical forms were used to convey certain meaning. He walks slow, he looks down, isn't it? He has humility, he is cautious. So whenever you will find people with Saturn being their Yoga Karaka, especially with Sthira Rashi, you will find their way of working. They will have a large plan, they will work very slowly, they will succeed. But on the other hand, if it is, say, Libra rising, which is a Chara Rashi, now there is conflict. Somebody who is very steady takes things easy, and then you have got Libra, who who are absolutely, they get upset very easily. And it is like that. What we say, the weighing scale, that I mean the old type of weighing scale, the Tula. You touch it at one end, it will go on. It will not come steady for a lot of long time, and then it becomes steady.
Yeah, the balance is
Tula
disturbed.
is steady. Tula is not steady. It is not steady. Understand that first. Again, those those symbols, they also have certain meanings. I mean, all of you must have seen. We say it looks like RAM. Nothing looks like RAM. You ask any engineer, connect those mm, uh, those stars in the constellation. They don't look at like the animals that are described. They are telling you certain qualities of those rashis. And since they were good breeders, knowers of creation, so they gave you those forms, so you understand what is the form and how it behaves. And so you will know what happens, isn't it? So digressing from the subject, but I think this is how astrology should be understood and read. Instead of saying that, X Devata is going to do something for me, that Devata is also sitting in our brains. This entire science has to do with how our brain is programmed at the time of our birth. This works on electricity, very small quantity of electricity. And the basic principle of engineering, all engineers should understand that change in magnetic flux induces electricity. And these 7 planets have their own magnetic poles, which have effect on Earth. So that is why we don't consider the upper planets or the so-called higher planets, because they have to influence here. Your anterior fontanelle is open at the time of birth. After 4 or 5 months, it closes. So that is the time that particular energy makes some imprint on your brain. And since these planets are always in perpetual motion and their trajectories are not concentric to each other, that position always changes. That electrical field is changing. So your original system is going affected in different manner, which for ease of comprehension, they talked in terms of planets. So now, unless we understand this, we go into all those sort of, complexities, which, do please people and give the astrologer a lot of money, but it doesn't help anybody. And I think this science is more for helping people who are distressed. So anyway, but that is an old person talking to you. Take ahead, otherwise we will waste our time.
Don't be giving yourself a hard time here. You have raised some very interesting questions and clarified some answers. The diversity is wonderful.
See, I mean, anybody who knows process of birth, who knows a bit of anatomy, physiology, he can understand what I'm talking about. I mean, it's easy, but I think in this world, at least in India, what has happened is we have divided subjects into different streams. Yes. Ancient India had all 100 sciences taught by the same person and the best of the person to all the students. And you can't have medical science as a different science and engineering as a different science. Otherwise, you can't have a pacemaker. Because the pacemaker has to be done by an engineer who also understands part medicine, and the medical doctor who is using it or inserting it has to understand engineering. But we have got engineering colleges, we have got medical colleges. Now, best of the engineering brains go to the engineering colleges. Best of the medical brains go to medical colleges. But medical colleges do not have access to the best engineering brains. And engineering colleges do not have access to the best medical brain. So this is happening. But anyway, this is life, and let us at least understand it in a holistic manner so that the knowledge is passed on properly to everybody. Everybody. So
Well,
can we?
I think you've done a wonderful job of opening minds
Oh,
to
you are so kind.
realize and to accept the flexibility and the
Right.
personal responsibility to
Right.
look further than one statement, never to just
Right.
swallow one.
Thank you. Thank you. So kind
I
of you.
know I'm going
You
to
did
do
second.
the work
Absolutely.
on the 7 and 8 for sure.
Okay. So the next one. Shall we take the next step? Beta? Yeah. Now here what we are doing is, as I suggested, we are taking Atma Karaka, the Rashi occupied by Atma Karaka as the Lagna itself. Where in the Lagna chart. Because this Atma Karaka with all this potency going and sitting in Scorpio, the second house of the Lagna, does have some influence there because he has already spent a lot of time in that, the earlier Rashi. Namashi, he has got certain strengths, so let us take him here. Okay, now what we see here is, uh, as we will come to the next aphorism, we see Jupiter, Mercury, and Sun in the second house. Okay, there is something talked about what a person will do when these planets individually are in second from the, as they say, Karakansha. But I treat them here. And that aphorism is a bit complex because it says Tatro. In Jaimini, wherever planets are not mentioned, the word is to be interpreted by Katapayadi. And that is indicated by the sage. He says, everywhere the Varna, Savarna, Rashaya. And Nagaraha. Not only in case of planets, you use the planets, whatever is given. Don't try to interpret it into Katapayadi. So we go to the next thing, and you remember that from this. So what he says, Tatro Ravo Raja Karya Paraha. If Sun is in the second house from the AK, that person is engaged in work of the king or is a politician. Now here I have deliberately given that some commentators have interpreted Tatrav as occupying the Karakansha itself. But it does mean two as per the Katapayadi encryption system, which is followed in Jaimini on the instructions of Sage Jaimini himself. So we know Ravi is there. Atal Bihari Bajpayee was politician. He was there for 40 years. And at the end of his career, he became the prime minister, which will come next. And so that fits him. Then the next one comes. Vanijas Tantu Vayaha Shilpino Vyavara Vidascha Saumya. Saumya means Buddha, the Mercury. So he has many qualities, one of which is he is a trader or a merchant. He can be a weaver, he can be a sculptor, and one who is competent. Vyavara Vidascha has different meanings. Vyavara Vida, many a times in colloquial language, we think that Vyavara means one who is good at trading or in the ways of this world. But Vyavara Vida actually is in Sanskrit has a different meaning. He says he can administer justice and that he is competent. One who understands Vyavara. So ancient time Vyavara was doing good to others. Nowadays Vyavara is to make as much money as possible from you. So we are talking about those types, and so you have to interpret like that. And he did become the prime minister and was able to administer justice. So we go to the next one. What is left is Guru. There are three planets there, isn't it? Karma Jnana Nishta Veda Vidascha Jive. Jiva is the name for Jupiter. Because, see, that is why he's also called Putrakaraka. Jiva is life. So he gives life. Okay. So when Jupiter occupies the second from Karkasha, the Jataka is devoted to knowledge, work ethics, is uh, very loyal, Nishtha, and knower of Vedas or divine sculptures. And in now from Gemini, we will go to the next one, which he was anyway. He was knowledgeable. He was known to his work ethics. He worked for 40 years in his field without any expectation. When there was no money. Nowadays, politicians do have money in India. But in those days, and especially with his sort of party, they were actually frowned upon. So next what he says is, this I have taken from Ganesh Datta Pathak Tika for a very specific purpose. When Shukra, Venus is with the Karakansha, there are different aphorisms and different meanings to it. Jaimini says Shatayuta, Shatayushi, that 100 years he says. He says Rajkiya, which is also correct, but then he says Kamina, that he is libidinous. Okay. Same thing is said by in the Santanam edition, but in Ganesh Datta Pathak edition, which is another edition of Prat Parashar Hora Shastra, rather which is called as Parashari, he says Karakansha Yada Shukro. If Venus is sitting in the Karakansha, that is why I am saying this is Karakansha. Rajamanya Sada Bhavet. He is always respected by king. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, when he was only a simple member of parliament and his party had only one member, even that time the Prime Minister of India said, and he was a very young boy, the Prime Minister of India said, this is a person who should become the Prime Minister. This is the quality that India needs. So he was always respected by kings, even when his party had no number and Congress had absolute brute majority. Sadindriya. See, he says Sadindriya. There they say Shatendriya. So this Sadindriya is one who has good body. He is still pretty hefty, good body. Shatayushcha. He lives for 100 years. Now you look at date of birth of Atalji and you will see he is still alive. He is still alive. And if you see his birthday pictures, he still looks robust, though he has Alzheimer's disease, so that Dushtagratas. So this is coming, this is happening on ground. So that is why I was saying perhaps we can call that as the Karakansha very safely. For certain reasons only. Okay, so this part is, he has good body, he has, and the way he is going, he will live for 100. There is no doubt about it. So we go to the next one. Shall we go to the next one? Then he says, Shukrena Kavir Vagme Kadyavaste. See, if Venus is there, that person is a poet. He gives excellent speeches and he understands poetry. Now, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a poet, a great poet. His oratory was excellent. I mean, he was the only politician that I know for whom literally lakhs of people would come from all over India just to listen to him. Generally, politicians pay people to come to listen to them, and he was the exception. So he was Kavir Vagmi. This is again from Jaimini and Kabad Neshtar. Then next they say, Kujena Nayayika. If Mars is in the 5th house from AK, then that person is a logician. He has great logic. And he was known as a great logician, had done his master's in political science, which he actually applied to politics and became the first prime minister who actually changed the face of India a lot from that old system of, censored things and, you having no expression and all that. So can we go ahead? Okay, now we come to the natal chart. As I had said, we should also see it from natal chart. In natal chart, what we see? They say Shubha Drushte Stheya. This is being talked about the 10th house. If the 10th house is aspected by benefics, then that person has persistence of work. He is absolutely devoted to his work. He never deviates from it. Since we are taking that aphorism from Jaimini, we use the Rashi Drushti, and Venus and Moon both are in a Sthira Rashi, aspecting the 4th Rashi, that is Cancer in the 10th house. And this is what Atalji was. So you have to use it at 3 different places to get to know a person. That is what I was trying to convey. So if you take only Swansha and do, most of the time in Gemini you might fail. And so shall we go ahead? That is where I have given the aphorism, I suppose. Shubhas Drushtes Theya. great determination, he will never be capricious. That is what is there. So this is what you have seen, and he worked for 40 years. There was no possibility of his party ever coming to power, and still he went on doing the same thing for 40 years. Yes, he did. His party did get majority, did uh, get into government. He became the prime minister. For to remain in for 40 years in politics without a blot on you, and to go on working without any money. I have seen him running on cycle in Nagpur, my city of Nagpur, and without any grumble whatsoever, and without any blot coming to his either character or his financial dealings or anything, is not very easy for anybody to do. So can we go ahead? I think that is the last of the yeah. So now, in conclusion, my opinion is simple: 7 Charakarakas. Rahu cannot become Atma Karaka. He will enter only if other 2 planets have identical degree and merge into 1 Karaka. Again, if a second set has similar equal degree, then the Sthira Karaka will come to the and occupy the place of the next Karaka, which falls vacant because 1 planet has merged into another. Navmasha Rashi occupied by Atma Karaka indicates possible bodily ailments. I am saying possible very specifically because they would be modified because of aspects of either benefics or malefics. Okay, so then 12th bhava from Navmasha, again, it should be seen for Ishtadevata. This is my opinion. Learned may have different opinion, because these are areas which are beyond this plane of life. So I would like to go to Navmasha for them. And then we treat the Rashi occupied by Atma Karaka in natal chart as Lagna reference point to know other matters like career, writing, etc. of the Jataka. Yoga is indicated by placement of grahas from Sarashak should also be seen from the Rashi occupied by Atma Karaka in natal chart. And the same can also be analyzed from, I have said Udita Lagna to differentiate it with that, because people might get confused with the Atma Karaka and natal chart. So Udita Lagna is ascendant Lagna. Lagna as in regular natal chart. That we should look at all these 3 to analyze the Atma Karaka and its effect. So this is my opinion, and I hope I have not talked too much and made you more confused than when we started, because yeah, there is a confusion here, and so that's all I can say.
You have done a wonderful job, and I'm most thrilled with this. You have emphasized the necessary flexibility, not to become totally down one path and only down one path, but to
that is what I believe in. Yeah, that is what I believe in. Because nobody is, I mean, we have got in our Puranas, we have references of Vishnu going to Shiva to know something, or Lord Shiva going to, see, they are just trying to tell us that when even gods need somebody else's advice, you better have that humility. And then my advice will always be that Satyam Bruyat, Priyam Bruyat, always talk nice. Don't be harsh. Because we get into those isms. No? This is my way of looking at things, and nothing else can be correct. I mean, let us not do it. We are astrologers. We are learning a science of probability. And this is a statistical science of a very high degree of accuracy if used properly. And the basic intention is to help people. And let us do that. You are already doing that. So, I mean, Saptarshi is doing that by releasing free magazines and, giving all those things for people to learn from. And this is what, anyway, astrologers are supposed to do. So, nice talking to you. Have a nice time.
It was wonderful talking to you.
So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We're very honored.
Thank you so much.
Then he said, please think on this fundamental question of astrology. Why are you born in so-and-so Lagna, Taurus Lagna, Karka Lagna? Why not in some other?